You clean the tables. Let the real minds solve the real problems. The words sliced through the bustling conference center like a blade, delivered with the casual cruelty only privilege could afford. Connor Mitchell, 24 years old, with a Stanford hoodie and an attitude twice his age, smirked as he watched Darius pause mid-wipe at the coffee station. The other founders around Connor's table erupted in laughter, their MacBooks gleaming under the harsh convention lights. Darius simply nodded, tucking his cleaning rag into his apron pocket without a word. That night, in a cramped internet cafe that smelled of instant noodles and desperation, he opened a battered laptop, held together with duct tape. 6 hours later, a pristine piece of code appeared in the inbox of Mitchell's company, accompanied by a single note. Try this. It'll reduce runtime by 62%. The San Francisco Tech Summit was supposed to be Darius Wynn's biggest paycheck of the month. 3 days of serving coffee, clearing tables, and staying invisible while the brightest minds in Silicon Valley discussed algorithms, valuations, and disruption. At 26, Darius had perfected the art of being unseen, a crucial skill when you're a black man in spaces that weren't designed for you. His mother, Evelyn, had taught him that lesson early. Baby, sometimes you got to be like water. Flow around the rocks until you find your way. She'd said it while working her third job, trying to keep their Oakland apartment after his father left. Darius had been 12 then, already showing signs of the mathematical genius that would win him a national championship in high school. But genius didn't pay bills, and scholarships didn't cover everything. The conference center hummed with the peculiar energy of concentrated ambition. Darius moved between tables with practiced efficiency, his eyes downcast, but his ears sharp. He'd been doing this for 2 years now, not just for the money, though God knew he needed it, but for the education. Every overheard conversation was a lesson. Every casual discussion of market penetration or scalable architecture was filed away in his remarkable memory. His real classroom wasn't in some ivy-covered building. It was here, in the margins of other people's success. The notebook in his back pocket was filled with fragments of conversations, sketches of algorithms discussed over artisanal coffee, business models drawn from memory. After clearing away the napkins they were scribbled on, his shift supervisor, Marcus, had warned him about being too obvious. These tech folks don't like being watched, he'd said. They're paranoid about corporate espionage. Just keep your head down and your hands busy. But Darius wasn't interested in stealing secrets. He was building something far more valuable: understanding. Every night after his shifts, he'd return to the studio apartment he shared with 2 roommates and translate what he'd learned into code. His GitHub profile, under a pseudonym, was slowly filling with projects that demonstrated principles he'd absorbed from the shadows. Machine learning models trained on datasets he'd scraped together. APIs that solved problems he'd heard VCs complaining about. All of it self-taught, using a phone with a cracked screen and whatever free Wi-Fi he could find. The current table was different, though. These weren't the usual venture capitalists or marketing executives playing at technical knowledge. These were engineers, real ones, and they were in trouble. Darius recognized the signs, the frustrated gestures. The laptops turned at angles to share screens, the energy drinks multiplying like rabbits. He'd been cleaning their area for 20 minutes, moving slowly, methodically, while his mind processed their problem. They were building an image recognition system for autonomous vehicles, but their algorithm was failing at edge detection in low-light conditions. The more they talked, the clearer the issue became to Darius. They were approaching it wrong, treating light as a constant, when they should be adapting their Fourier transforms to variable luminosity vectors. The threshold degradation is killing us. One of them muttered, a young woman with MIT on her sweatshirt. We've tried every optimization in the book. Maybe we need a new book. Connor Mitchell replied, his frustration evident. He was the CEO, Darius had gathered, of a startup called Vision Forward that had just secured Series A funding. $20 million, riding on solving this exact problem. Darius found himself at their table, ostensibly wiping down an already clean surface. The words formed in his throat before he could stop them. Have you considered adjusting your Fourier transforms for variable light conditions? If you modify the vector calculations to account for luminosity gradients. He trailed off as 6 pairs of eyes turned to him in unison. The silence was deafening. Then Connor's face split into a grin that held no warmth. Did the busboy just try to solve our computer vision problem? He looked around the table, inviting others to share in his amusement. This is beautiful. Please, by all means, tell us more about Fourier transforms. Did you learn about them while mopping floors? The laughter that followed was uncomfortable, even from his own team. But Connor was on a roll now, standing up to face Darius properly. You know what? I love this. The help thinking they understand what we do. It's like my dog watching me code and thinking he could debug JavaScript. More laughter. Louder now. Other tables were starting to look over. Tell you what. Here's my card. When you're done playing janitor, maybe you can come clean our actual offices. But leave the thinking to those of us who, went to school for it. The MIT woman looked uncomfortable. Connor, come on. What? I'm being generous. Most CEOs wouldn't even acknowledge the staff. He turned back to Darius, whose face remained carefully neutral. You seem like a smart guy. For a busboy. Stick to what you know. Yeah? You clean the tables? Let the real minds solve the real problems. He tossed a crumpled napkin onto the table Darius had just cleaned. A final insult. Darius picked it up without a word, added it to his bin, and moved on. But as he walked away, he heard Connor continue. Fourier transforms for variable light conditions. Jesus. Next thing you know, the barista will be explaining quantum computing. The words stung, but not as much as the familiar weight of them. Darius had heard variations his whole life, from teachers who moved him to remedial classes despite his perfect test scores, from counselors who suggested trade schools when he talked about MIT, from investors who suddenly lost interest in his pitches the moment they saw his face. But this time was different. This time, he knew something they didn't. He knew exactly how to solve their problem. The rest of his shift passed in a blur. Darius's mind was elsewhere, working through the mathematics, visualizing the code structure, planning the implementation. By the time he clocked out at 11 p.m., he had the entire solution mapped out in his head. He just needed a computer and time. The 24-hour internet cafe on Mission Street was his usual haunt. $5 an hour for a terminal that barely ran. But it was enough. The owner, Mr. Funchen, knew him well enough to offer the broken laptop in the back, the one held together with tape and prayers. Working late again? Mr. Chen asked in accented English. Always, Darius replied. Settling into the uncomfortable chair, the laptop wheezed to life, protesting every keystroke. But Darius's fingers flew across the keyboard with purpose. He started with the core problem. Their current algorithm treated light as a binary condition, present or absent. But real-world conditions were never that simple. Shadows had gradients. Reflections created false positives. Low light conditions didn't mean no light. They meant complex light that required nuanced interpretation. His solution was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of fixed Fourier transforms, he created adaptive ones that responded to luminosity data in real time. The vector calculations shifted dynamically, creating a fluid model that could distinguish between an actual edge and a shadow's edge, between a reflection and an object. Line by line, the code took shape. Darius lost himself in the familiar rhythm of problem-solving, the outside world fading away. This was where he belonged, in the pure logic of mathematics, translated into functional reality. His formal education might have ended with high school, but his real education had never stopped. Every free online course, every pirated textbook, every Stack Overflow thread had been a classroom. And now, in this dingy internet cafe, he was about to school some of Silicon Valley's finest by 5 a.m. He had a working prototype. It wasn't pretty, no fancy UI or comprehensive documentation, but it was functional. More than functional. It was revolutionary. He ran it through several test scenarios using publicly available datasets, watching as it performed flawlessly where he knew Vision Forward's current system would fail. The runtime improvement wasn't just the 62% he'd estimated. It was closer to 70%. But Darius wasn't interested in embarrassing them, just in proving a point. He packaged the code carefully, adding just enough documentation to be useful without being condescending. Then came the hard part, deciding how to deliver it. He could have been petty, could have sent it directly to Connor with a scathing note, but that wasn't who Evelyn Wynn had raised. Instead, he found Vision Forward's public contact email and composed a simple message. Gentlemen and ladies, I overheard your team discussing the edge detection problem at the Tech Summit. As someone interested in computer vision, I took the liberty of exploring a potential solution. The attached code implements adaptive Fourier transforms that respond to variable luminosity conditions. Initial tests show a 62% improvement in runtime, with significantly better accuracy in low-light scenarios. I'm not looking for credit or compensation. Consider this: a gift from someone who believes good ideas can come from anywhere. Best regards, a friend. He hesitated over the send button. Part of him wanted to sign his name, to claim the victory. But he knew how that would go. They'd dismiss it as impossible, assume he'd stolen it from somewhere. Or worse, ignore it entirely. Anonymous was safer. Anonymous let the code speak for itself. He clicked send and closed the laptop. The cafe was starting to fill with early morning workers grabbing coffee. Darius packed up his things and headed home for a few hours of sleep before his lunch shift at another venue. He'd done what he could. The rest was up to them. The response came faster than he'd expected. 3 days later, his phone, the same cracked device he'd learned to code on, buzzed with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was another debt collector. But something made him swipe right. Is this Darius Wynn? The voice was female. Nervous. Who's asking? My name is Jennifer Chen. I'm the CTO of Vision Forward. We need to talk about the code you sent. Darius's heart stopped. They traced it back to him. He'd been careful. Used a VPN. Anonymous email. But these were tech people. Of course they'd found him. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, Mr. Vin. We're not calling to threaten you. We're calling to thank you. And to offer you a job. The words didn't compute. Darius sat down heavily on his bed, his roommate looking over with concern. What? The code you sent. It's brilliant. Beyond brilliant. It solved a problem we've been throwing PhDs at for 6 months. We ran it through our full test suite. It's not just faster. It's more accurate across every metric. We had to trace the email to find you, because we need someone with your skills on our team. I'm prepared to offer you a position as our lead computer vision engineer, starting at $200. Zero a year with equity. The number was astronomical, more than Darius had ever imagined earning. But something held him back. Was Connor Mitchell part of this decision? There was a pause. Connor doesn't know yet. He's been in meetings all day. But as CTO, I have full authority to make this hire. He won't approve it. Not when he finds out who I am. Then help me understand. Who are you? Darius almost laughed. I'm the busboy who tried to tell him about Fourier transforms. The one he said should stick to cleaning tables. The silence on the other end stretched so long, Darius thought she'd hung up. Then, you're joking. I was working the tech summit. Blue catering uniform. Connor told me to let the real minds solve the real problems. Oh my God. Her voice was barely a whisper. You're that guy. Connor was bragging about it at dinner. About putting someone in their place who thought they understood our work. But you actually solved it. In what? A few hours? 6 hours? At an internet cafe in the Mission. I need to process this. But the offer stands. Actually, no, it just went up to $250. Ling. And I'll handle Connor. But Darius had been processing too. And a different plan was forming. I appreciate the offer, Miss Chen. But I need a few days to think about it. Of course. Take all the time you need. And Mr. Wynn, I'm sorry. For what happened. For what Connor said. That's not who we want to be as a company. After hanging up, Darius sat in the dim light of his shared apartment. Mind racing. The smart move was to take the job. To secure his future. To finally escape the cycle of poverty that had defined his life. But something deeper stirred in him. All his life. He'd been told to be grateful for scraps, to take what was offered, and not ask for more. But what if he could build something of his own? What if, instead of joining their world on their terms, he could create a new one? That night, instead of sleeping, he wrote, not code this time, but a business plan. A vision for a company that would find and nurture talent in places Silicon Valley ignored. Kids like him who learned to code on borrowed computers. Immigrants who spoke better Python than English. Women of color who were tired of being the only one in the room. By morning, he had 20 pages and a name. Decode AI, democratizing code. Amplifying intelligence. The universe seemed to agree with his decision. That afternoon, while working another catering gig, he overheard 2 angel investors discussing their frustration with the homogeneity of Silicon Valley talent. Everyone's hiring from the same 5 schools. One complained, we're missing out on incredible minds because we're too lazy to look beyond our bubble. Darius did something he'd never done before. He approached their table, not as service staff but as an entrepreneur. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. I'm working on a solution to exactly that problem. 20 minutes later, he had their business cards and a meeting scheduled for the following week. The presentation he gave them was rough. He had to borrow a friend's laptop and create slides at the public library. But his passion was undeniable. When they asked about his background, he told them everything. The poverty, the self-teaching, the catering gigs, even the incident with Connor Mitchell. So you're the one who sent that code to Vision Forward. One of them said, eyes widening. Jennifer Chen has been telling everyone about it. Says it's the cleanest implementation she's ever seen. That's correct. And they offered you a job? They did. But you're here instead, asking us for seed funding to compete with them. Not compete. Compliment. There's enough problems in the world for everyone to solve. I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to solve them. 2 hours later, Darius walked out with a commitment for $500. Zero in seed funding, and a valuation that made his head spin. The investors, it turned out, were tired of the same recycled pitches from the same pedigreed founders. Darius represented something different, authentic innovation, born from necessity, not privilege. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of incorporation documents, hiring decisions, and sleepless nights. But Darius wasn't alone anymore. His first hire was Maria Santos, a brilliant programmer he'd met at the internet cafe who'd been rejected by every major tech company despite her skills. His second was James Park, a veteran developer who'd aged out of the youth-obsessed industry, but still had more knowledge than people half his age. One by one, he built a team of overlooked talent, people whose resumes didn't fit the traditional mold, but whose abilities were undeniable. The news broke on a Tuesday. TechCrunch ran the headline that would change everything. From cleaning tables to cleaning code, how a self-taught genius is disrupting Silicon Valley's talent pipeline. The article detailed Darius's story, from his time as a busboy, to his revolutionary solution for Vision Forward, to his new company that had just secured its first major contract with a Fortune 500 company looking for fresh perspectives on their AI challenges. The reaction was immediate and polarizing. Some celebrated it as a long overdue challenge to the industry's elitism. Others dismissed it as a fluke or, worse, suggested he must have had help. But the code didn't lie. The solutions Decode AI delivered spoke louder than any critic. Within 6 months, they had contracts with 3 major corporations and a team of 50 engineers, all hired from non-traditional backgrounds. Connor Mitchell's response came in the form of a LinkedIn post that tried to rewrite history. Always happy to see talent succeed, regardless of where it comes from. At Vision Forward, we've always believed in meritocracy. The comments section tore him apart. Screenshots of his original mockery, provided by his own uncomfortable team members, went viral. His board requested his resignation within a week, but Darius took no joy in Connor's downfall. When reporters asked for his response, he simply said, "I wish Mr. Mitchell well. We all have room to grow, privately." Though, he saved the screenshot of Connor's LinkedIn post, not out of spite, but as a reminder of how far he'd come. The real vindication came when MIT invited him to speak at their computer science graduation. Standing at the podium, looking out at hundreds of eager faces, Darius thought about all the lectures he'd never attended, all the opportunities poverty had stolen from him. But he also thought about all the lessons learned in internet cafes and from overheard conversations about code written on broken laptops and dreams that refused to die. "They told me to know my place," he began, his voice steady and clear, "to stick to what I was good at, to leave the real problems to the real minds." He paused, letting the words settle. "But here's what I learned. Talent doesn't care about your zip code. Innovation doesn't check your transcript. And the next breakthrough might come from someone society has already written off." He talked about his journey, but more importantly, about theirs, about the responsibility that came with privilege and the importance of keeping doors open for others, about building technology that served everyone, not just the few. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. But what moved him most were the emails that came after. Students who saw themselves in his story, professors reconsidering their admissions criteria, companies reaching out to partner with Decode AI's talent pipeline. A year later, Decode AI's valuation hit $50 million. They'd expanded beyond contracting to building their own products, including an AI-powered education platform that provided free coding instruction to underserved communities. Darius had offers to sell, to merge with larger companies, to take his place among the tech elite he'd once served coffee to. He turned them all down. Instead, he kept building, not just a company, but a movement. Decode AI became known not just for its innovative solutions, but for its radical approach to hiring and company culture. No degree requirements. No culture fit interviews designed to exclude. Just skills, tests, and potential. The result was the most diverse and creative engineering team in Silicon Valley, producing solutions that companies staffed entirely with Stanford and MIT grads couldn't match. The final scene came full circle. Darius found himself back at the San Francisco Tech Summit, but this time as a keynote speaker. The same conference halls where he'd been invisible now held 1,000 people waiting to hear his words. As he walked to the stage, he passed the coffee station where it had all began. A young woman was working there, efficiently clearing tables, trying to remain unseen. Darius stopped. "Excuse me," he said gently. She looked up, startled, clearly expecting a complaint. "I know you're busy, but can I ask, what do you do when you're not here?" Her eyes darted around nervously. I study computer science. Online courses mostly." Darius smiled and pulled out his card. Not the CEO card with its fancy titles, but a simpler one that just had his name and email. "Send me your portfolio. We're always looking for people who are hungry to learn." She took the card with shaking hands, clearly not believing this was real. As Darius walked away, he heard her whisper to a colleague, "Do you know who that was?" On stage, facing an audience that now included some of the same people who had laughed at him, Darius felt no triumph, only purpose. His opening words came not from prepared remarks, but from his heart. 2 years ago, I stood in this very room, invisible to most of you. I cleaned your tables, served your coffee, and listened to your dreams while mine seemed impossible. Today, I stand here not because I'm exceptional, but because someone finally gave me a chance to prove that talent exists everywhere. We just have to be willing to see it." He paused, scanning the audience, noting the uncomfortable shifts, the avoided eye contact from some, the eager engagement from others. They laughed when I cleaned tables. I smiled when I cleaned their code. But this isn't about revenge or vindication. It's about revelation. Every person you dismiss, every resume you ignore, because it doesn't fit your pattern, represents potential wasted, innovation lost, problems unsolved. The presentation that followed wasn't about Decode AI's success metrics or revenue projections. It was about the janitor who became their head of security architecture, the undocumented immigrant who designed their most successful algorithm, the formerly homeless teenager who now led their mobile development team. Each story, a testament to talent, overlooked and potential realized. Don't let the world tell you where you belong, Darius concluded, his voice carrying the weight of every rejection, every dismissal, every moment of doubt he'd overcome. Show them where you're needed. Because the truth is, we need all of us. Every perspective, every experience, every brilliant mind that's been told it's not brilliant enough. The future isn't built by the few who fit the mold. It's built by the many who break it. As he left the stage to thunderous applause, Darius thought about his mother, Evelyn, who now lived in a house he'd bought her in the Oakland Hills. She'd cried when he showed her the deed, not because of the house itself, but because of what it represented. Her son had found his way, not by flowing around the rocks like water, but by becoming a force that moved them The young woman from the coffee station was waiting backstage. Having abandoned her shift, "Mr. Wynn," she said breathlessly. I can't believe. Do you really want to see my work?" "What's your name?" Darius asked. "Aisha. Aisha Patel." "Well, Aisha, let me tell you something someone should have told me years ago. Your ideas matter. Your perspective is valuable. And yes, I absolutely want to see your work. But more than that, I want you to know that you belong here. Not serving coffee, though. There's no shame in that work, but solving problems. Building the future. That's where you belong." 6 months later, Aisha Patel would file her first patent as a junior developer at Decode AI. 2 years after that, she'd be leading their quantum computing division. But in that moment, backstage at the tech summit, she was just a young woman, seeing her first glimpse of a door that had always been there, waiting for someone to show her it was open. That's the legacy Darius Wynn built. Not just a company valued in the hundreds of millions, not just revolutionary code that changed how machines see the world, but a fundamental shift in how Silicon Valley saw talent, potential, and the value of every person who dared to dream beyond their circumstances. The boy who cleaned tables had cleaned up more than code. He'd cleaned up an entire industry's vision, revealing the brilliance that had always been there, waiting in the shadows for someone to finally turn on the lights. And in conference rooms and coding boot camps, in internet cafes and ivory towers, a new generation of innovators learned the lesson Darius Wynn had taught. Talent has no uniform. Genius has no pedigree. And the next world-changing idea might come from the person you least expect. The revolution wasn't just technological. It was human. And it started with a simple recognition that every person has the potential to solve problems, to create value, to change the world, if only someone would give them the chance to try. Darius Wynn didn't just take his chance. He created chances for everyone who came after. And that, more than any algorithm or innovation, was his greatest contribution to the world.